Hello, bonjour. I'm Andrew Mosker, President and CEO of National Music Center, and this is the NMC Amplifier Podcast. How long have you been collecting? Most of your life?
I'd say about 25 years, and it's the find, and it's the stories, and it's the artists. And that's the thing about Indigenous music. You're never done.
Hello, I'm Andrew Mosker. Welcome to Amplifier, National Music Center's podcast, where we explore the voices of exciting and interesting people who do inspiring things in music. And our guest today is definitely one of those people. His name is David McLeod. David is the CEO of Native Communications. He does many, many things. In addition, he's executive producer of Indigenous Music Countdown, a board member of the Aboriginal People's Television Network, and the vice chair, a board member of the Winnipeg Folk Festival, and many other things. Most importantly for National Music Center, though, for us here today, he's the chair and curator of our Indigenous Advisory Programming Committee, which is an initiative we started a number of years ago. You're the founding chair and the founding curator of that initiative. So welcome to Amplifier, David. Great to see you. Welcome back to Calgary.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. This is a magic place. It's inspiring. It's one of a kind. And you can't leave without a story, without a new thought, and the people, of course, amazing people.
Fantastic.
And Andrew, it's just incredible work you do as well. So
thank you very much, David.
Incredible work. I mean, yeah.
I really appreciate that, David. So before we get into our conversation, the most important thing I'd like to do today is a land acknowledgement. Before we begin. So Studio Bell, home of the National Music Center, is a national cultural organization here in Calgary, Alberta, here in East Village in Mohkinstsis, Calgary. We recognize that the city and the surrounding area was historically a major trading hub for Indigenous people. We acknowledge that Calgary is within the Treaty 7 signed territory, which was signed on September 22nd, 1877 by 5 First Nations, the Kainai, Blood, the Tsuut'ina, the Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, and the Stoney Nakoda. In addition, Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. The National Music Center is a national cultural organization devoted to amplifying the love, sharing, and understanding of music, and the NMC is committed to highlighting the many contributions of unique voices within First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities. David, welcome back to Mohkinstsis.
Good to be here. It has so much interesting history here, and I'm a visitor and much respect. So thanks for opening with the land acknowledgement.
My pleasure. There's a few things I wanted to chat with you about today. First and foremost, just to kick things off, National Music Center is celebrating its 5th anniversary this year. So you're in town to celebrate our 5th anniversary, which is happening tonight. We're really excited about that. You've been part of this journey for the last few years, our very early years of National Music Center. And when we opened in 2016, our purpose was to really bring together the various voices in Canada from many different communities to try to tell this nation's story. Sometimes it's the story of truth and the things that have happened in the past, and also try to find ways to work together towards a more positive future together. And elevating those voices through music, whether it's through exhibitions, live music, bringing artists in to make recordings and write new music, being a fulcrum for education, has all been part of the purpose of National Music Center. We've accomplished a little bit of that in the last 5 years. We've got a long way to go still. We're still in our early years. But prior to opening in 2016, we had set ourselves out with this task and this vision as going far back as 2005. Wow. I was very fortunate enough to be in the position to be offered the job to do something transformational in music here in Alberta, here in Calgary specifically. And so when we invented the National Music Center, we looked across Canada and we realized there wasn't a place that was part museum, that was part live performance, that was part incubator, that was part education focused, all rolled into one facility that could represent and elevate those voices of different elevate those communities through a lens of music. So 10 years later, we opened up the National Music Center, and here we are 5 years into our first 5 years. And Indigenous voices has been a central part of that reason to build a National Music Center. I was very lucky to study history in my life, my whole life, and so I've known about residential schools for a long time. I've read the TRC. I've been a fan of all music, and I really feel like what we're accomplishing here with the communities across Canada we work with, especially with you, we're starting to really take action to elevate Indigenous voices and to build a better future for everybody that lives here on this land, whether it's here in Calgary, Mohkinstsis, or in other parts of Canada. So it's a real honor for you to have joined our team, and so that we can work together to really explore these different programming opportunities together. So I just wanted to kick that off and as a bit of an introduction about why the National Music Centre exists and what was its raison d'etre early on, and talk a little bit with you today about some of the work that yourself not only is leading, but a general view of how artists from Indigenous communities are progressing in Canada right now, and what more things we can do to advance Indigenous voices and Indigenous music in Canada. So welcome, and tell us a little bit about yourself. I went through your bio just a little bit. You're from the Pine Creek First Nation, Treaty 1 in Winnipeg. Tell us a little about why or how you first got inspired by music.
Well, Indigenous music. I mean, I was a teenager, and there wasn't really a lot of Indigenous music on out there that was released. There was some, but it was limited, and you had to find it. At times it's like, is it a community event and somebody's has a table and they're selling their music? Is it a gas station? You happen to stop at a gas station and a local artist has their music being sold at a gas station? Is it a community newspaper and there's an artist that's going to appear at the Friendship Center? You go to the Friendship Center and that's where you find the cassette or you find a record at that time. And so that's kind of where it started. I know initially, like, the first artist I ever heard, it was Elma, my mom's friend named Elma, and I was babysitting for her, and the kids were sleeping, and I was going through her record collection, so I'm like Rolling Stones, Rod Stewart, CCR, Steve Miller, and then Ernest Munias.
Oh, yeah.
And then I'm like, I remember taking out this album and being like, oh my gosh, this is a guy that lives in northern Manitoba, right?
Yeah.
So I take out the vinyl, put it on the platter of the turntable, I drop the needle, and boom, it was the first time I've heard him. I've heard about him, and then I'm hearing this record, and I'm going, it's like a relative.
Yeah.
Instantly, it was like, this guy is from the community, and I'm listening to a record, and to me, he was just as good as any of those artists that he was sitting with. And he was good enough to be with the Steve Miller, with the CCR, with the Rolling Stones, in that box of records, right? It was like, he fit right in there. And to me, that was really magical, because it was transformative in the fact that it was an Indigenous artist that was on vinyl on a record. And that to me was a big moment. And I don't know how old I was then. I must have been like 13, 14 or something.
Wow, so that was like a portal in a way for you.
It really was.
Opened up a whole other world for you.
Because it was and then you skip ahead years later. I've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Indigenous vinyl albums that I've been collecting for over, 25 years.
Amazing.
I've got one Willie Dunn album right now in Winnipeg that I'm talking to a record guy yesterday about, and you get a Willie Dunn, a mint shape Willie Dunn album. I mean, it's expensive. You're looking at about $150 for that album, right?
Yeah.
And then of course you get the albums where you're like, you luck out, and you're like, you find a powwow record that's like $5 at this used record place, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is great. So the hunt, it never ends.
Yeah,
we
understand that.
That's the thing. You know about that.
Yeah, we're collectors here too. How long have you been collecting? Most of your life?
I say about 25 years. The big moment for me was hanging out in Toronto. It was during the days when they had the Canadian Aboriginal Music Awards. Okay. So they would be an award show, and they started early '90s, and they tapered off in the early 2000s. I think there was 13 years of them. So I'm with Brian Wright McLeod's place. He wrote the Encyclopedia of Native Music.
Oh, wow.
So we buddy up. We've been buddies ever since. You know, I was talking to Brian just a week ago. And so we are always exchanging notes, and you know, it's the find, and it's the stories, and it's the artists. And that's the thing about Indigenous music. You're never done. There's always something you don't know about. I have a few albums. I don't know anything about the artists. I don't know where they're from. There's zero online about them, you know, and they're real treasures. So yeah, so I would say it's connecting with the people and the stories that are really inspiring. You know, like when you know, I've had the chance to sit with community artists. I've had the chance to sit with Buffy a few times. And it's always about the stories, you know. So
yeah, fantastic. Well, Ernest Monius.
Yeah, yeah. And I told him that story.
Did you?
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
When we first met, we were really just in the early days of trying to figure out how best to elevate the voices of Indigenous artists in this country here at the National Music Center.
Oh.
We were just in the early days of it. And again, that was not that long ago because we've only been open for 5 years. So it was such an incredible honor. I know we met through Alan Gray Ice, who I've known for many years. Alan was initially on our exhibitions advisory committee, which was a group of volunteers that we had brought together and community members from across Canada to provide input on the development of the exhibitions here at the National Music Center. So this would have been really between 2014, 2015. So that's where I first met Alan. And of course, I see Alan at the Junos every year at some music event, national music industry event. So we were really grateful that he introduced us and that you came on board to act as the chair of this very important NMC advisory committee. So tell us a little bit about, you know, your reflections of the work that you're doing here at National Music Center. We had opened up with you the Speak Up exhibition, so you're the curator of the Speak Up exhibition, and the and advising us clearly as well on content, artists who could come into residencies, like we've had Nahiwak here, we've had Tribe Called Red here.
Kaylee Cardinal. Amazing. Sebastian Gaskin.
Yeah.
I mean, the list goes on. And it's all up and coming amazing artists.
So I just want you to share with our listeners today the work of the advisory committee and the work that you're doing.
I think, you know, the advisory committee would be, you know, I'm hearing all their voices in my head all of a sudden, like Loa Bibi, I'm hearing her, I'm hearing Alan talk. I mean, it's all the influences we have. I think everybody would go back to where this country comes from. You know, Indigenous music, when you think about it, you have to, if you look pre-colonization, you're looking at a music that's existed for thousands and thousands of years. And when, you know, the country of Canada started, it was an interesting time. I mean, you had the 1876, you had the Indian Act in place. So the Indian Act basically looked at Indigenous people, First Nations people, as wards of the state, wards of the country. Mm-hmm. So it's like, you know, it's a very bizarre document. It's like, you know, a First Nations person can't be in a pool hall, like that's in there. And then, but also, music and culture are in there, where it's like you could be arrested and jailed for practicing your culture, or if you're wearing regalia, you had to get permission from an Indian agent to do that, and this went on for about 75 years. Mm-hmm. So you look at a period where it's, you know, a lot of Canadians take playing music, practicing music, performing music for granted. It's just, oh, it's music, you just do it. But there was a time where it was considered to be illegal. And at that time, there was musicologists out there. Yeah. And they're like, we got to record some of this because it's going to disappear. This culture is going to disappear. These people are going to disappear. Yeah. So they're traveling all over the country trying to do that. And then at the same time, there's residential schools, 150,000 kids being taken in residential schools. And it's like, so, and then you had music going underground where it's like, you know, music is like, so important to the culture. I met a lady in Pasquia Cree Nation years ago at a community gathering, and she knew some of her traditional Cree songs. And I said, well, how did you save those songs? And she said, I want to show you something. She said, I went to residential school. I wasn't allowed to sing these songs. So what I would do is I would hum them as I washed the floors.
Wow.
And I kept humming these songs, and I got punished. I got caught by a nun for humming a song.
Wow.
So she showed me scars on her knees that were inflicted because she was punished. She had to kneel on pencils, and her
My God.
and her knees were scarred from that.
Wow.
And she said, "But you know what? My grandkids, they know 4 songs that I saved when I went to residential school."
Wow.
Now somebody would say, "Is that just music?" No, that's a lot more than, just a song. It's culture. It's generational. It's saving something so valuable that you're going to do whatever you can to save those songs. Yeah. And so I think you start there.
Yeah.
and
absolutely.
it's that history that exists with music, and there's the protocols that go along with it too. Like I've met traditional singers who go, it's protocols are just as important as the song. So before the song, I have to do A, B, C, D, and it's like, okay, so you have to honor that. So I think that's something as well that goes along with that. And Indigenous music, as Brian said in his encyclopedia, it can be whatever it wants to be. And our committee. Now we'll get to our committee finally. but our committee really sees that. And we have First Nation, we have Inuit, we have Métis representation. And what's happening here at National Music Center is we're forging new ground, like representation. Like, how do you represent all Indigenous music and all the nations at the National Music Center?
Yeah, it's a big task.
It's a big task.
It's a very big task.
And so
yeah.
we ask questions about, is what would be the protocol for this? Who do we talk to? And how can we do this right? And so because it's interesting because we'll be at the table and we'll go, wow, nobody knows the answer to this. I thought we were supposed to be here to have all the answers.
That's what happens when you invent something.
Exactly.
And like the National Music Center was an invention. We created it in 2006. Nobody said, we need to build a National Music Center here. Let's build it in Calgary, here in Mohkinstsis, in East Village. We were an organization involved in many different types of music programming. I would say mostly European classical music in the 1990s. And then that organization kind of evolved into what should we do next. And then when they hired me, I was fortunate enough to be in a position where Canada's national music story, including that of First Nations and Indigenous people, which goes back thousands of years, does not have a home, and it needs a home. Yes. For educational purposes, primarily was where I was coming from, based on just what you just said about residential schools and the passing of oral tradition.
Yeah,
and how it was forbidden in residential schools, but how important it was to the dissemination of culture. Like, I think of some of my icons, Alan Lomax. Okay, Alan Lomax, and if you're a musicologist, and I'm a trained musicologist, and you studied anything to do with American music, Alan Lomax spent a lot of time in the field doing field recordings in the United States, in mainly African American diasporas, trying to find the roots of African music as it came across to North America in slavery, and how it basically gave birth to the blues and to jazz and to country music.
Yes.
And in Canada, here in Canada, the oral traditions of recording Indigenous music and music that was Indigenous to this land occurred as well. I was thinking of Jeremy Dutcher's record.
Incredible,
right? Incredible, right?
I've been to Canada Archives, and I've I did digital versions of the wax cylinder recordings.
Exactly.
I was asked to see where they're stored, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. And we have some of those here, right?
And yes, of course. And it was like, it's magical,
It is. It's magical.
And and the musicologists of that era, like they didn't have the answers at that time. They were trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
They're like, what's the timing of this song? What's the song structure?
Yeah. Is there a key?
Is there a key to
Yeah,
this?
that's a European perspective,
Yes,
right?
yes,
The
yeah.
European perspective,
Exactly.
right? Trying to analyze the structure, the form, the key, the rhythmic structure.
Or even the musicologist giving advice to the person performing the song.
Yeah,
At
totally.
times, like I'm like, oh, and even the speed of the wax cylinder itself.
Yeah.
There was times where it's like it was actually it was playing a little faster.
Little fast, that's
and
right.
then they had to slow it down just like a fraction to try to get the original sound.
Exactly.
So it's like, and all that's going on today, and you get Jeremy Dutcher in there, who's in the Speak Up exhibition.
Yeah.
His beautiful cape, and that's an example of an artist who's looking to his past, his nation, songs from his territory, learning from them and take them to the next level. And where does he go? He gets, he's a Polaris Prize winner.
Yeah.
For 4 years in a row, there were indigenous artists winning Polaris Prize.
Yeah.
So you go from this wax cylinder to more recent times where it's like picking up the one of the most prestigious prizes
Yeah.
for music today,
Yeah.
and that is a testament to the story and the resilience
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
the artists and the culture in the community. So, and that's something I think that our committee is really has their eyes on. It's
That's
like,
good.
It's like, looking back, but also looking at what's going on now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like when you sit around that, your comment about when you sit around the table with the committee and go, wow, we don't have an answer to this, or we don't have an answer to that. When the National Music Center was born, and we made the decision to try to get our arms around the stories of music in Canada and try to be inclusive of all communities, that's a monumental task.
Oh, and when you have the right people around the table, though, you do find those answers.
You do.
So there's
You do.
some debate, there's some questions, there's some reaching out, and you get those answers.
Yeah.
And then we feel very solid once we get those answers too and figure it out. And that's I really like that because it's progressive and it says what a lot of cultural institutions should be doing across this country.
Yeah.
It's you have one person doing that job would not work.
Yeah.
You need a committee of people.
Exactly.
And then especially if people are working together for the common cause of National Music Center, as opposed to everybody has their own cause at the table, then it turns into a bit of a spider web.
It does, yeah.
So, but this works. So I think what's happening here needs to happen with art galleries, whatever it might be, universities across the country. NMC is a leader in that point for sure.
Appreciate that. And I when we started to work together in 2017, 2018, I wanted to focus on specifically some of the actions that we've taken together with the committee.
Yeah.
There's work that you do with the committee about who and how, and then there's actually putting that into action.
Yeah.
So the first thing we opened up together was Speak Up.
Yes.
In 2018, and I still remember that day. You gave some very impassioned comments.
It was a beautiful time. Speak Up, of course, recognizing artists who've made social change, who've brought an awareness within the community that wouldn't be there without them. Also pushing boundaries.
Yeah.
You get somebody. You get artists like we talked about, Jeremy Dutcher, who talks about language, and you get your Buffy St. Marie's, you get your Willie Dunn, who's incredible work is being recognized. I know the liner notes. It was just announced. Kevin Howes did the liner notes, and it's up for a Grammy, and that was just announced. And it was, and I'm seeing Kevin this weekend.
Fantastic.
And he's visiting Winnipeg, so it's like. And it's the powerful stories that are behind all those artists. And it's like, everybody was like, do we have enough artists to do this? Right? It's like, how many can we do each year?
Yeah.
In 2022, we're looking at 5 artists in 1 year.
Wow.
Because there's so much catch up to be done, And there's so many artists out there, and the community as well. There's an expectation that certain artists, especially from the north, are recognized that have been not recognized for so long. So the responsibility is to look at some of the names that are well known, but also those that aren't known, and balance it out. So
Yeah.
that's quite the trek and the learning curves, like. But you hear about, you hear stories like Charlie Panianiak, an Inuit artist. He's in the hospital, and in Brandon, and he's from the far north, and he gets gifted a guitar, and
While he's in the hospital?
While he's in the hospital.
Yeah.
Changes his life.
Wow.
And you're like,
Music therapy right there.
and
The
it's-
healing power of music.
and that's exactly it. He's like, he's emulating artists he's heard on the radio, but he's like, after a while, he's like, but I want to sing about what I see, I see out my window and of my house and in my community. I want to talk about the weather. I want to talk about, all these things. And then so those kind of stories just are so impactful, because it's just like, they start at one place and then they end at even a more powerful place.
Yeah.
So those those are my favorite.
That exhibition, when we opened it, it was a very moving day, and it inspired a lot of people that were there for that opening. Our staff, who have not had, I think I would describe it this way, the privilege of really getting to know Indigenous culture, Indigenous music. They just haven't had the connection to it. And it opened up a lot of people's eyes on our team, the volunteers that were there, the donors that were there, that were just wanted to be there to support the opening of that exhibition here at National Music Center. So I think my feeling about it is there's so much more that we can do, because it's all about education. This is truly about,
Yes.
Truth and Reconciliation is about the truth of what happened in the past and elevating that truth. Education is about that. And I think the work that you're doing with the committee is incredibly important from an education perspective, to elevate the stories of these artists and the work that they've done. Uncover them in the first place, to your point.
Absolutely.
Just these artists have existed and have done this work. Let's play catch up and get them some recognition, some awareness, and to educate other audiences about the work that these artists have contributed to the musical landscape in this country. So it's incredibly important that exhibition opened, and it's going to continue. Tell us about what's happening next with that exhibition.
Well, I think just to go back to that, I know we like Northern Cree members of Northern Cree were present, and they played their drum.
I remember, yeah.
And what some of that is not said, it's felt. When people heard them perform a song, or share a song, I should say, it was moving. People felt
It was
felt
very
that.
moving.
And they performed at 2017 at the Grammys in front of the world music as well, at the music world, and moved them, and they didn't have to say anything about the song.
Yeah.
They didn't. It wasn't an introduction. It was just they played, and it reverberated throughout that room, as it did here at that opening. So I think that's the beauty of music too. Sometimes it's not so much the words; it's what's felt. Yeah. And those stories, like right now, go to your question. We're looking at 5 inductees, and so what happens is, as a curator, I'll put forward probably about 16, 17 names with bios, and then the committee goes through it, and then they vote on it, and then
it down.
They vote on it. We narrow it down, and then they pick their 5 from there, and it's a lot, because you're trying to represent contemporary artists, so it's not looking at the past totally, but you want to look at some of the trailblazers. So generally you're looking at early 60s, later 60s, 70s, 80s, and then you're looking at later artists throughout all these time periods. So I like the discussion, and I look forward to it, actually.
Good.
Because people will be very mindful and heartfelt about who they think should be, and also it's not just about it's not about music necessarily. It's about the person themselves too.
Yeah.
How have they been in the community? What's their contribution been like? What's their reputation like out there?
Yeah.
And so those things are discussed. So I have to say that I look forward to it, but at the same time, it's definitely a lot of work.
Yeah.
And when those names are announced next year, I'm gonna be full-heartedly happy about it. And I research, I look for the names, and then our committee brings up names as well.
Good.
They'll go,
That's
you know,
good.
you know what I think should be on here? Who's not on this 17, 18 list? This person.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. And then it's like, okay, let's look at that, and it's great. And some of the artists, like we had John Arcand, like a fiddle great, one of the preeminent Métis fiddlers in this country, who's recorded many songs. He's archived songs. There's a fiddle camp in Saskatchewan every year, John Arcand, and so he's taken fiddle music to such a high level, and it deserves to be in there. And his legacy is unquestionable. And I've had a chance to talk with him on the phone. I've had a chance to talk to his wife, and and then also it's like, can we get a fiddle from John Arcand and display it here at National Music Center?
Even on loan.
On loan, exactly.
Yeah.
And Jeremy Dutcher's cape, Isque's part of her costume, because she said it's not a regalia, but it was part of her costume that she wore, stage wear, and it was just beautiful. So getting those here, one of the hand drums that Northern Cree use, for example.
Yeah, it's here.
Oh, it's here, and it's getting the. And then I saw students. I had the privilege before COVID of seeing students come in. So it was a lady. She had about 7-8 students with her, and they're looking at the pictures on the wall. They're reading a little bit.
Yeah.
They're looking at some of the items on display, and I'm going, okay, so they're not going to walk away knowing everything, but they're seeing Indigenous faces. They're seeing Indigenous stories. They're reading some highlights a bit, and they're walking away. And where else in this country is that taking place? Nowhere else is that taking place. So I'm seeing that going, there's some magical moments here that are going to be long lasting. It's not stereotypes of Indigenous people that we've grown up with. I mean, Western movies and Hollywood, just the negative portrayals, hundreds and hundreds of movies, thousands of movies, I should say. And so they're walking away with something a little bit different, right? Yeah. And so I have to say that for me was really important to see.
Hey, sorry for the interruption. I just have a quick favor to ask. If you enjoy the show, please take a moment to give us the highest rating you can on your podcast app. Or if you're watching on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. National Music Center is a registered charity with a mission to amplify the love, sharing, and understanding of music, and we rely on donor support to achieve this mission. If you like this show or anything else the National Music Center is doing, please consider leaving a donation by following the link in the description. Hey, thanks in advance. And now back to my conversation with David McLeod. That's great that you had a chance to experience that, and the students will return, David.
Yes.
And the good news is, even with COVID, because they haven't been here, as you know, we moved Speak Up online.
Yes.
And you did some wonderful audio introductions for each of those inductees.
Look forward to doing more. Yeah. We're sharing those stories online.
Yeah.
And, and I know that all 22 parts of the National Music Center, all the facets of it, have been put online.
Yeah.
Or working towards
Throughout
that.
COVID.
Throughout the COVID.
Yeah.
So that's, congratulations on that. That's a huge feat. So
it is a huge feat. I think a lot of culture organizations needed to do that anyways.
Yeah.
COVID forced us to do it quicker. But it certainly makes the story global now.
Yes.
Anybody can access the stories of Indigenous voices in music anywhere from Canada, anywhere in the world now, and hear your voice on those audio clips.
And I think what it does is it lets people know when you are in Alberta, Calgary, to make sure you come to the National Music Center.
Yeah.
So it's like, because seeing it is different than seeing it online too. Just
Absolutely,
nothing beats actually seeing it. I know when I saw Geddy Lee's basses,
Yeah.
I was just like, I must have walked around like 4 times looking at his basses.
That was a great exhibition we did. We were very lucky to do that with Getty. And there is the physical, and then there's obviously the virtual
Yes.
piece online. So if you, again, in our 5-year anniversary, we have are celebrating both the physical accomplishments we've made with physical exhibitions, concerts that we've hosted here, students that have been here, residencies, which I want to chat with you about.
Oh
in a
my
minute.
gosh, yes.
And then all of the content that comes from those activities that happen in this building are available on Amplify, which is basically our blog. And it's like our mini microsite that helps disseminate all the content that we create here, so you can access it anywhere. And enjoy the work of National Music Center online, like this podcast that we're doing right now.
Well, yeah, and you know what? We got to mention the studios too.
Yeah.
like the truck studio is one of my favorite.
It's a pretty special studio. So as it relates to the work of the advisory committee, again, so the exhibition Speak Up is a physical museum exhibition.
Yes.
That you can see, you can walk through, and you can learn the various stories that you've shared.
And you can hear the stories behind the artists and why. I mean, essentially, you listen to it and you know why they're in the Speak Up exhibition, right? So and it's going to be developed too as well, because you only have so much space in the walls.
Correct.
So you look at a digital version. Do you look at projections? Do you have big video monitors? I mean, this is something. The questions that are being asked right now for the expansion of it.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll be at 20 artists in no time.
Yeah.
So within this space, you have to tell those stories, and to me, that's just going to make it. It's going to be more impactful. It's going to be more powerful. Their heads are going to spin. They're going to go, I didn't know any of this, and people walking out are going to be. They're going to remember that.
Yeah.
So I think it's an important. It's a really important space to continue to be developed, and I look forward to it growing and growing, because it's like, when is this going? There's no end to it, really.
Really, and that's the beauty of museum exhibitions and telling stories and creating that narrative, particularly those voices in Canada. Just as you demonstrated, there are many unknowns about the people that have created song, the traditions of song and music, and it's up to us here at the National Music Center, working with you and the committee and others to try to find out these stories and share them and share the beauty of them. And that's really what education is all about here at the National Music Center.
Well, yeah, I mean it's and it's unique because you're not nobody's researching those stories or going there as much as the National Music Center. So that's and it's the people here too. They have a passion for it, a genuine passion. It's like, I've definitely come across a lot of passion.
That's good. We love passion here at the NMC. Okay, there's museum exhibitions that you've led and worked on and that you've curated, and then there are when Indigenous artists come here to do residencies.
Yes.
So tell us about what the committee's done with
the
those.
residencies are really important for career growth. Like an artist might put out an EP, or they might have an album out or some singles, and you'll listen to the singles and you go, wow, this artist needs to learn this and this and this to go next level.
Yeah.
But they have what it takes, and that's happened with certain artists where Sebastian Gaskin. I was here. I had a chance to talk with him and Kaylee Cardinal. They were having supper, and I sat down and we just kind of hashed out, how's it going? And there was, I know Kaylee at that time, it's a few years ago, she was just talking about her vocal ability and to get to that next level, transitions. It was about how to carry certain notes, how to move from one note to the next. So she was learning that, and it's an art form. So you skip ahead. There's Kaylee Cardinal winning a Juno years later, and this is definitely her experience at National Music Center is definitely a part of that journey that got her to hold that Juno in her hand.
Yeah, she won that Juno in 2019.
Yes, and now we got Sebastian Gaskin, who right now is he's on the rise very quickly for his soul music. And here's a guy who is in northern Manitoba. He's a Cree artist. He's playing in bar bands. He's playing metal. He's playing, he's playing like rock standard tunes to be in his bar band, right?
Wow.
And you skip ahead years later,
Yeah,
and then he's doing this soulful music.
Oh, yeah.
that it's an R&B feel. Sometimes it has a little bit of a reggae in there. Some of it, like it's just very soulful. So you go from, playing a bar band, in a hotel.
Yeah.
He was, I think it was the Thompson Inn he was playing. He was telling me about that. And you go, dreams, people out there, dreams do come true.
Wow.
And it's a lot of work, but it's those connections, like coming to National Music Center and getting that training. So when he was here, it was about song structure. So he was working on his song structure. He was working on his vocals. And all of that contributes to his growth as an artist. So when you see that happen, you go, okay, or you see the guys from Tribe Called Red here,
Who had a great time not only with just working on their new music, but actually interfacing and using some of the historic instruments here.
Yes.
Which I know they really delve deeply into the studio and the equipment that we have here, which is very unique.
They were working with Tonto, of course.
Right.
And at that time, Cecil was here.
Yeah, Malcolm Cecil was
Malcolm Cecil was incredible.
Yeah.
I had a chance to talk with him about distortion, like going into the red in the studio. I'm like, Lou Reed did that with Velvet Underground, and I thought he was crazy when he's in the studio. And then Cecil Malcolm explained it in terms of math.
Yeah.
Right? It was numbers and math, and he goes, well, this is why.
Yeah.
It's obvious. But he's sitting with the guys from Tribe Called Red, and it's incredible. They're sampling powwow music through Tonto with Malcolm, and what's coming out at one point sounded like a fluttering. It was like a fluttering of wings. So it took a powwow song and turned it into that, and it was like. And then they're in the studio working on all these different sounds, and with Malcolm's help, they had, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of sounds.
Hundreds.
And they were going through it, and they were playing. I had the privilege of hearing some of them, and I'm like, wow, and it's this, and then Malcolm leaves us.
Yeah.
But that legacy is carried on with Tribe Called Red. Who are now Hallucination. They've since changed they've updated their name, and so that is incredible legacy of putting an instrument that's like no other, and the person who actually made it here and the guys from Tribe together, like. What are the chances that those three worlds are going to come together?
Yeah.
But it happened here.
It happened here, and an interesting story about Tonto. So that is one of the most iconic analog synthesizers really in the history of electronic music, period. Built in the late 60s, early 1970s. And when Malcolm was looking for a home for Tonto, because he was getting older, he wanted to ensure that the instrument itself was kept in the hands of artists. He did not want it to end up, and I'll just say it this way, in a museum behind glass and never touched again. So he found us. He was living in upstate New York at the time. He found us. This building, National Music Center, was under construction at the time, so we weren't open. We were in our old building, which was called Cantos Music Foundation. And we had developed a reputation for collecting electronic instruments. So people around the world who had electronic instruments knew about us because they knew we were collectors. And I received a call from one of our staff that Malcolm had reached out to, the late John Limesider, who was our technician here for many, many years. And
wonderful man.
Yeah. JL said to me, he goes, Andrew, you're not going to believe it. And I go, what? And he goes, Tonto's available. And Tonto had been on our list of desirable things to acquire if it ever became available. And the timing could not have been worse for us to acquire that because we were in the middle of trying to get this building built. But one thing led to another, and a donor came through because Malcolm wanted to obviously sell the instrument, so we had to look around and look at we're a nonprofit charitable organization. We have lots of different supporters at many different levels. So we found a donor who had been very supportive of helping us acquire instruments. And we made a case for Tonto, and Tonto ended up here in Calgary at the National Music Center. So this incredible musical instrument, this iconic musical instrument, ended up here in Calgary at the National Music Center through a series of interesting conversations and years of relationship building. And the whole purpose was to ensure that artists like Tribe, now Hallucination, and many others could explore its beauty.
Yes.
And I was so happy for Tim in particular from Tribe, who got a chance to work very closely with Malcolm, because Tim said to me here at NMC, I had just asked him when he was here, when he started, he goes, yeah, we're just going to get a few samples off Tonto, maybe have some fun with it. And then by the end of it, this is what he said to me, and I'll never forget it. I go, how is your experience of working with Malcolm and Tonto? And he went, dude, my life has been totally changed. We came here with one expectation and have left with a completely different one because of the work with Malcolm and that instrument.
And how Malcolm lit up working with those guys.
Yeah.
And he had this assurance, there was just this assurance about him that it was there's going to be some incredible sounds coming your way.
Yeah.
And there's no question it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I was just to have that trust that he had, and just that in Tonto, it's like a living part of who he was is still here.
It's amazing.
Is what it is. So
it's amazing.
And so that to witness that here at National Music Center, incredible. Another artist that just Northern Cree recently recorded, and I had a chance.
Wanted to talk to you about that as well.
And
go for it.
And that talks about the equipment that's available here. Because what was interesting, and I'm curious to know this, but the microphones. Yeah. There's a lot of experimentation with all the microphones here, and finding what microphones to use, where to place the microphones, because we're recording powwow, which for the sound people out there, it's the distance of the mic, the type of mic, which mics are you using, and I heard the mix, not the final mix, but I did hear a mix of one of the songs, and it was incredible. It was like you're hearing things in distance, but you're hearing things close. And so I think that this album they're releasing next year is going to do really incredibly well. I mean, they've been invited to New York. I think it was in January, and they've got an invitation to Paris.
Amazing.
And they've got, so again, that connects.
This incredible committee and the work that you're doing is fantastic.
So it connects to this music. It connects to what's going on. Steve Wood is just, he's been in this with this group for so long, and he's at that point where he's thinking of moving on, letting his son kind of look after the group. But his legacy and what's going on right now has never been more important. But it comes back to microphones.
Yeah.
I'm so curious to know about the microphones.
Well, I can share a little bit.
Yeah.
Again, getting back to what is the purpose of the National Music Center? To amplify, the love, sharing, and understanding of music in Canada, to build a home for music in Canada. And that includes so many different voices, especially Indigenous voices. And how do we achieve that in a unique way? Yeah. So we have a museum of exhibitions. We spoke about the Speak Up Gallery. And you mentioned there are 22 or 21 other galleries, 22 exhibition galleries here at National Music Center, each of which tells a different story about music in Canada. So that's one thing. Second thing we do is we produce and present a lot of live music. In fact, Northern Cree, the first time I heard Northern Cree was at our Alberta Spotlight series. And again, it was an education, I think, for so many people, because here's this incredible group with a long legacy, decades long, from Treaty 6, from Edmonton, that many Calgarians, I know for a fact, didn't even know they existed, did not know that this group even had performed on the Grammys, didn't realize that they had been around for this amount of time. Yeah. And we're a very established powwow group, very respected around the world. Oh. And they got to perform on our stage here at the National Music Center. The first or second year we were open. It was incredibly powerful and moving. And then getting back to microphones, we have an incredible collection. So we're ostensibly a museum. So what's unique about our museum? We have two streams of collecting. Music technologies that represent key milestones in innovations from all over the world. So we have keyboards, synthesizers like Tonto, recording equipment, microphones, which are all part of the recording studio environment. And then that's our first stream of collecting. And our second stream of collecting is stories from music in Canada. We mentioned Jeremy Dutcher and Iskway, the drum from Northern Cree that's on display in Speak Up, and a whole host of other things, from guitars that Randy Bachman used to many, many, many other things in our collection that represent Canada's national music story, from some of its great artists and also from some of its communities that are part of the fabric of this country. So, microphones. What is so unique about the NMC is that when we have residencies here, artists can come in and use our equipment. And we have an amazing microphone closet. It's very extensive. We have microphones. I believe our oldest microphone is a Telefunken from the early 1930s.
Wow.
In the early 1930s. So this is like the beginnings of microphone technology.
Yeah.
When we were talking earlier about Jeremy Dutcher's use of wax cylinder recordings, which kind of were around in the late 1800s and early 1900s before microphones.
Yeah.
We have microphones really started to come of age in the 1920s. So we have some early examples from the 30s right through to, the standard Shure SM58s that everybody uses. And then there's a lot of microphones in between that we have that tell that story of how microphones evolved. So for Northern Cree's sake and their experience here, they had an opportunity to explore the various timbres that these microphones will capture, depending on what their setup is. And so I'm really excited to hear that myself. And I'm glad you're excited about it.
Yeah, no, and I know that like the advancement of recording powwow is really important nowadays too. A lot, it's back in the day, I have powwow records from the 70s. And it's, you could tell it's just it's like one microphone hanging above.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I can kind of get that feel where you listen to this and you go, okay, I want to know how they did that.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of young people who listen to powwow are going to be, they're going to know something's different about this album, So I think that's what's going to happen. I mean, and just for the listeners out there, like Apple did a feature page on Northern Cree. Like powwow sells like crazy online. Like, I was talking to Alan about this. Just that they're selling more than a lot of some independent bands that you think are fairly big.
Wow, amazing.
That powwow sells more than those.
And why do you think that is? Is it because of the education and the discovery and the awakening?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people they're searching out. Powwow's been in some people's family for a long, long time. It's a family tradition to perform or even listen to powwow, but the young people have a real certain taste for a certain style of powwow.
Yeah.
So it's hitting, like you listen to something from the 70s, it's a little more laid back. And you listen to something today, they're hitting that drum hard, they're singing high, they're singing very powerfully, very different than, and then up in, certain regions, people like it when you sing super high. People challenge you. It's a challenge to hit certain notes. So, and I think that, so it's great to see National Music Center playing a leading role in that. And it goes back to something like, people don't think about microphones.
I know.
Or people are like, oh, it's microphones. Well, microphones are pretty darn important.
They're important.
And it's having the right people here as well that know those microphones and what can be done with them. Because so it's like some of them had paper in them back in the day, so they're real fragile to temperature.
Right. Ribbons
in there. It's it's like you got to know your stuff.
Yeah.
So that's having the people here that know what they're doing with those microphones is also equally important. So yeah,
it is. No, we've got a great team. I just want to sort of chat about one more thing, and it's really about the future and the work that you're doing with National Music Center here. Osotokino is next, and we're really excited about it. We have an announcement that we're working on, obviously, early in the new year about Osotokino. And I wanted to just talk about Osotokino for just a minute,
Yes,
about
for
its
sure.
about its meaning in particular. And I when I was reading about it, the words that stood out for me was, if we were to translate Osotokino, it translates to mean recognize a voice of.
Yes.
And I just wanted to talk about that for just a minute, and then throw to you to talk about the actual activities themselves, the programs
Sure.
themselves that are going to come. But to recognize a voice of, it takes us back to, I think, the beginning of our conversation just now about the purpose of National Music Center.
Oh my gosh, it's a powerful word, and it's Blackfoot word, and our committee instantly loved it. And that recognition of voices that aren't being recognized, that should be recognized, are up and coming to be recognized, and the world is recognizing these voices quite from our community quite often, the First Nation, Métis, Inuit community, and it's almost like a prayer in itself, is how I would put it, Andrew, because it's, for far too long, Indigenous voices have not been recognized, and there's so much catch up to be done. And honoring people, like, we lose people, and it's nice to have them honored and recognized before they go, because, after they go is okay. It's important as well. But when you're speaking to artists that are being recognized, they are so humble, and yet, and it's always about community. It's not about me, is generally the response. This is about my family. This is about, that person who did give me that guitar when I was in the hospital. It's about them as much as it is about me. And when you hear those kind of stories, you go, oh my gosh, like, it's humbling to hear those kind of stories. So yeah, I think where the future is recognizing voices, building on those voices, and celebrating those voices, and also bringing those voices together with people that, like we've talked about in your show here, is just that people coming together and building and having opportunities that wouldn't have existed otherwise. So in the end of it all, you realize possibility is far larger than you may have expected, and that's where it's at.
Yeah.
Those dreams, like Sebastian Gaskin playing in a cover band in a bar in northern Manitoba, going on major stages and being invited to play it. His career is building quickly, and I just go, wow, and that is that's very heartwarming at the end of it all.
I think, thanks so much for sharing that. When I was listening to you just speak right now, I was thinking, like, the work that my hope and the hope of our team, and working closely with you and the rest of the Indigenous Advisory Committee, is that the artists that come through these programs, that make new music, that go on to careers in music and expression of their art form, someday somebody will be going through a box of albums just like you were, and find their own Ernest Monius record, and it will have been recorded here at the National Music Center, and that will continue this, I think, important work that we've set out to do.
Yes, and the whole idea, the word reconciliation is like a hockey puck. It's passed around a lot.
Yeah.
And but it's the action. When you see action taking place, like that's happening here with the committee, with the education, with working with the community, like that is a forward thinking, and that is the advancement. It's not just a sign when you come in saying, oh, we're recognizing. We are in this territory, which is important, but thinking that's all you have to do, right? This organization, under your leadership particularly, is doing a lot more. I know that you've also built up the, people are going through an awareness training with
that's correct,
about Indigenous peoples as well. Your staff.
We are. We're all taking the Indigenous Canada course, which is being offered by the Native Studies at the University of Alberta. It's a 12 module course that you do online.
Yes.
So I'm in module 2 myself,
Nice.
and others on our staff and our volunteer
And that
are at
is
various stages.
that ties into reconciliation.
Yeah.
That's action taking place, right? So
Yeah.
it's actions rather than words. So I think that that gives you entrust in the organization more. I know our committee loves that, that there's movement taking place to advance the organization. So and with the committee as well, it's an example to the rest of the country.
Yeah.
So yeah.
David, I wanted to thank you so much for all that you have done with the committee for National Music Centre to help us work towards this very aspirational vision we have that we set out to do. We set out ourselves, this course that we set ourselves on, going back to 2005, 2006, and then eventually opening up National Music Centre here at Studio Bell in 2016, and now 5 years later into it. I'm very honored to hear your perspective that we're taking meaningful action as it relates to truth and reconciliation and advancing and elevating the voices of Indigenous people and music in this country in particular. And look at their response. I mean, I think what you've just said about the amount of streaming that's happening with Powwow right now.
Yep.
Artists that are winning Juno Awards.
I
mean, it's
Polaris
just-
Pride. I mean, there's no end to it.
Exactly.
And-
Outside of the Indigenous category too.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That.
And that's important. But part of my brain says it's not always about the awards as well. If people are going back and with their talents and their skills and developing young people in their communities as well, sharing what they've learned, that knowledge, that's important, just as important.
Yeah.
Some people would say more important than some of those awards. So we have to always think of a grassroots level as well, and of course those huge achievements. So they're all
It's always
they
a
all
balance.
play a role.
It's a balance.
Yeah.
It's all part of what we say in the music sector. It's all part of the ecosystem.
There you go. That's it.
It's all part of the ecosystem. Thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah.
Thanks for being my guest. Thanks for all you do with the advisory committee. And thanks. Looking
yeah.
forward to the gala tonight and to doing more with you in the future and the committee. So thank you again for being here.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. And really thankful. National Music Centre it exists. It's a gift, truly a gift, and a gathering place like no other in this country. So congratulations on all the work you've done and your team, of course. So
Thank you.
Miigwech.
Miigwech. All right. Thanks, David. Thanks for listening to the National Music Centre's new podcast, NMC Amplifier, with me, Andrew Mosker. We have lots of other great content available for free if you head over to amplify.nmc.ca. National Music Centre is a registered charity with a mission to amplify the love, sharing, and understanding of music, and we rely on donor support to achieve this mission. If you like the show, or anything else NMC is doing, please consider leaving us a donation. NMC Amplifier is recorded on Treaty 7 in Mohkinstsis, Calgary, Alberta, Canada, at Studio Bell, home of the National Music Centre, and hosted by me, Andrew Mosker. Our executive producer is Brandon Wallace. Technical producer, AV and post-production supervisor is Chad Schroeder-Gillespie. Video and audio production team include Raphael Salas, Phil Jukes, Caden Chenoweth, Matt Feature, David Katibu, and Jacob Barton. Marketing, design, and publishing by Brandon Wallace, Juliana Capone, Emily Holloway, and Brett Cassidy. And Ioana Busiak is our administrative coordinator. To learn more about National Music Centre, go to studiobell.ca. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time.